It was a sunny afternoon when Malik, a friendly and hard-working taxi driver, parked his bright yellow cab at the curb in an upscale neighborhood. He had been driving for hours, trying to earn enough to pay his bills and send some money to his family. As he adjusted the mirror, a notification popped up on his screen. It was a new ride request. Moments later, a well-dressed woman with a sharp expression approached his car. She looked annoyed, tapping her phone, as if something had already ruined her day. Malik quickly got out, opened the door for her, and greeted her with a polite, "Good afternoon, ma'am." She barely glanced at him and muttered, "Just drive." Malik returned to his seat and began the ride. The atmosphere in the car was tense. Malik tried to make small talk, asking politely, "How's your day going?" "Karen," the woman snapped, "can you just focus on driving?" Malik nodded and kept quiet, focusing on the road. He turned on the radio softly, hoping it would ease the tension. But Karen immediately objected. "Turn that off. I don't want to hear any noise," she said sharply. "Of course," Malik replied, turning off the radio without complaint. As they drove on, Karen continued to complain. "It's too cold in here. Can you turn down the air conditioning?" she demanded. Malik adjusted it immediately. Then she added, "Why are you taking this route? Is this some kind of shortcut? Are you trying to waste my time?" Malik calmly explained, "This is the fastest route to your destination, ma'am, but I can take another way if you prefer." She rolled her eyes and went back to scrolling through her phone, mumbling something under her breath. Malik chose to remain silent, focusing on driving safely. When they finally reached her destination, Karen got out of the car and slammed the door behind her. Malik sighed, relieved that the ride was over. But before he could pull away, he noticed Karen talking loudly to a nearby bystander. Her voice grew louder, and she pointed at Malik's cab. "He touched me," she suddenly yelled, drawing attention from people around her. Malik's heart sank. He opened his window and asked, "Excuse me, ma'am, what are you talking about?" Karen stormed toward his car, her face red with anger. "You heard me. You harassed me in your cab." A small crowd began to gather, and someone called the police. Malik was stunned, frozen in disbelief. He knew he hadn't done anything wrong, but the way Karen was yelling made it look like he had. As the sound of sirens grew closer, Malik tried to remain calm. He had no idea why this was happening, but he knew he had to stay composed. "I didn't do anything," he said softly, his voice steady but filled with pain. The sound of sirens filled the air as a police car pulled up to the scene. Two officers stepped out, their expressions serious. Karen wasted no time rushing over to them, pointing back at Malik's cab. "That man harassed me in his taxi," she exclaimed, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Malik stayed in his car, trying to process what was happening. He felt a wave of fear wash over him, but he knew he had done nothing wrong. Taking a deep breath, he rolled down the window as the officers approached. "Sir, step out of the vehicle," one of the officers said firmly. Malik complied, keeping his hands visible. "Officer, I don't understand what's going on. I didn't do anything." Karen interrupted before he could say more. "He touched me while I was in the car. I felt unsafe the whole time," she said, her voice trembling as if she were truly frightened. The officers glanced at Karen, then back at Malik. "Do you have anything to say about this accusation?" one of them asked. Malik looked directly at the officer, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I did not touch her. I drove her to her destination, and that's all. She's lying." Before he could explain further, Karen interjected again. "He's lying. I felt threatened the entire ride." The crowd watching grew larger, with some people whispering and taking out their phones to record the scene. Malik could feel the weight of their stares, and it made his heart pound. "Sir, we need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back," the officer said, pulling out handcuffs. Malik's stomach dropped. "But I didn't do anything wrong," he pleaded. Please, just check my car or ask for proof." The officers, however, seemed more focused on calming the situation than finding the truth at that moment. They handcuffed Malik and led him toward the police car. Karen stood nearby, arms crossed, looking both angry and self-assured. "Thank you for handling this," she told the officers. As Malik sat in the back of the police car, his mind raced. How could this happen? Why would someone lie about something so serious? He glanced at the crowd, noticing a young woman holding up her phone, recording everything. She gave him a sympathetic look, and for a moment, Malik felt a glimmer of hope. At the police station, Malik maintained his innocence. He told the officers his side of the story, but they seemed skeptical. Meanwhile, Karen's exaggerated version of events was being taken seriously. Malik sat alone in the holding cell, his head in his hands. He knew the truth was on his side, but he also knew how easily people could believe a lie. All he could do now was hope that someone would come forward with the proof he needed. Malik sat on the cold bench in the holding cell, staring at the gray walls. He felt frustrated and helpless, but deep down, he knew he had to stay calm. The truth would come out eventually, he told himself. Still, the weight of the false accusation felt unbearable. Meanwhile, back at the scene, the young woman who had recorded the incident, Rachel, was watching the crowd disperse. She replayed the video on her phone, listening closely to Karen's accusations. Something about her story didn't sit right. Rachel didn't see any evidence of wrongdoing in the footage she had captured. Malik had remained professional the entire time, and Karen's claims seemed exaggerated. Rachel hesitated for a moment, but then made a decision. She walked over to one of the officers who was still at the scene. "Excuse me, officer," she said politely. "I recorded what happened. I think you should see this." The officer looked surprised but nodded. "All right, let's take a look." Rachel handed over her phone, and the officer watched the video carefully. The recording clearly showed Karen yelling and pointing at Malik, but there was no sign of any inappropriate behavior on his part. The officer's expression changed as he realized the situation might not be as Karen had described. At the same time, Karen was sitting at the police station, giving her statement. She spoke confidently, adding dramatic details about how unsafe she had felt during the ride. The officer taking her statement nodded but remained neutral, jotting down her words. A few minutes later, the officer who had watched Rachel's video arrived at the station. He pulled the lead investigator aside and shared the footage. "There's something you need to see," he said. The investigator watched the video, his brow furrowing. "This doesn't match her story at all," he said. The officers decided to confront Karen with the evidence. They asked her to step into a private room, where they showed her the video. Karen's face turned pale as she watched. She stammered, I must have been mistaken. Maybe I overreacted." The lead officer frowned. "This is a serious accusation you made, ma'am. It could have ruined an innocent man's life. Are you saying now that it didn't happen the way you claimed?" Karen avoided eye contact, clearly flustered. I was scared. I don't know what I saw," she mumbled. The officers, now doubting her entirely, decided to release Malik. As they informed him that he was free to go, Malik felt a mixture of relief and frustration. He had been proven innocent, but the damage to his reputation still lingered. Walking out of the station, Malik saw Rachel waiting outside. She approached him with a small smile. "I showed them the video. I hope it helped," she said. Malik's eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he said softly. "You didn't have to do that, but it means the world to me." Malik walked out of the police station, breathing in the cool evening air. He still couldn't believe what had happened, but he was thankful to be free. Rachel, the young woman who had recorded the video, stood nearby, waiting for him. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that," Rachel said. "When I saw how things were unfolding, I couldn't stay silent. I knew you were innocent." Malik nodded, his voice calm but heavy with emotion. "Thank you. If it weren't for you, I don't know what would have happened." Meanwhile, back in the station, the officers continued their conversation with Karen. Her confidence from earlier had vanished. She fidgeted in her chair as they questioned her. "Ma'am, you made a very serious accusation," one officer said firmly. "The video evidence shows no sign of harassment or inappropriate behavior. Why did you claim otherwise?" Karen hesitated, her face turning red. I don't know," she muttered. "I guess I felt uncomfortable. He didn't look like the kind of person I'd expect to drive me." I panicked. The officers exchanged glances, their expressions stern. "Your assumptions could have ruined an innocent man's life," one of them said. "This kind of behavior is unacceptable." Karen's eyes darted to the floor. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered. But her regret felt hollow in the face of the harm she had caused. Outside the station, Rachel offered Malik a ride home. He hesitated at first, but then accepted, too tired to walk or call for another cab. As they drove, Rachel asked, "Do you think she'll face consequences for what she did?" Malik sighed. "I don't know. All I care about is clearing my name. What she did was wrong, but holding on to anger won't help me. I just want to move forward." Rachel admired his calmness. "You're handling this with so much grace. Not many people could do that." When they arrived at Malik's apartment, Rachel handed him her contact information. "If you ever need help or support, don't hesitate to reach out," she said. Malik thanked her again and stepped inside, feeling a mix of exhaustion and gratitude. He knew the situation wasn't completely over, but he felt hopeful now that the truth was out. The next day, the story began to spread. Videos of the incident and updates on the case appeared on social media, sparking heated discussions. Many people were outraged by Karen's false accusation, while others praised Rachel for stepping forward with evidence. Malik's calm demeanor and professionalism during the ordeal earned him widespread support. At the same time, Karen began facing public backlash. Her actions were criticized heavily, and she found herself grappling with the consequences of her lies. As Malik watched the reactions online, he realized that the incident could become more than just a personal experience. It could be a moment to raise awareness about the importance of truth, fairness, and standing up for what's right. Karen sat in her home, staring at her phone. The story of her false accusation against Malik had spread online, and the comments were relentless. People were furious about what she had done, calling her out for her actions. News outlets picked up the story, sharing the video Rachel had recorded, and the truth was clear to everyone. Karen couldn't escape the backlash. She felt a heavy weight in her chest as she scrolled through the comments. Words like unfair, dishonest, and harmful jumped out at her. Karen realized that her rash decision had caused harm not just to Malik, but to herself as well. She couldn't stop thinking about how her actions had nearly ruined an innocent man's life. Meanwhile, Malik tried to return to his normal routine, but things weren't the same. Some of his regular passengers treated him with extra kindness, expressing their support and apologizing for what he had endured. Others hesitated to book rides with him, unsure of what to believe despite the evidence proving his innocence. At the taxi company, Malik's manager called him in for a meeting. "Malik, I just want to say I'm proud of how you handled everything," the manager said. "You stayed calm and professional, even in the face of such an unfair situation. If you need anything, we're here to support you." "Thank you," Malik replied. "I'm just glad the truth came out. I want to keep doing my job and helping people." That evening, Malik received an unexpected message on his phone. It was from Karen. She wrote, "I owe you an apology. What I did was wrong, and I can't begin to express how sorry I am. If you're willing, I'd like to meet and apologize in person." Malik read the message several times, unsure how to feel. Part of him wanted to ignore it, but another part of him wanted to hear her explanation. After thinking it over, he decided to meet her, not for her sake, but to find closure for himself. The next day, they met at a small cafe. Karen looked nervous as she sat across from Malik, avoiding his eyes. "I don't even know where to start," she said softly. "What I did was terrible, I made assumptions about you that I had no right to make, and I let my fear and prejudice cloud my judgment. Malik listened quietly, his expression calm. Do you understand how much damage you could have caused? He asked. You put my freedom, my job, and my reputation at risk. Karen nodded, tears in her eyes. I know, and I'll never forgive myself for it. I just hope you can. Malik sighed. I don't know if I can forgive you right now, but I appreciate that you're taking responsibility. What matters to me is that you learn from this and never do something like it again. Karen promised to reflect on her actions and make changes in her life. As Malik left the cafe, he felt a sense of relief. He couldn't change what had happened, but he could move forward, knowing the truth was on his side. After the meeting with Karen, Malik felt a mix of emotions. While he was glad she admitted her mistake, he still carried the weight of what had happened. But instead of letting it bring him down, he decided to focus on moving forward and turning this experience into something positive. The story of Malik's ordeal continued to spread, and more people reached out to him, offering their support. Community leaders, local activists, and even a few journalists contacted him, wanting to share his story to raise awareness about the dangers of false accusations and the importance of fairness. One evening, Malik was invited to speak at a local community event. At first, he was hesitant. Public speaking wasn't something he was used to, but he realized this was an opportunity to make a difference. He could use his experience to encourage understanding and fairness. When the day of the event arrived, Malik stood in front of a crowd of people, feeling a bit nervous but determined. He took a deep breath and began to speak. My name is Malik, and I'm a taxi driver, he said. A few weeks ago, I went through one of the most challenging experiences of my life. I was falsely accused of something I didn't do. It hurt me deeply, not just because it was unfair, but because it showed how quickly people can judge without knowing the truth. The audience listened intently as Malik shared his story, explaining how Rachel's video had helped prove his innocence and how the situation had affected him emotionally and professionally. But instead of focusing on anger, Malik emphasized the lessons he had learned. This experience taught me the power of kindness and standing up for what's right, he said. Rachel didn't have to step forward, but she did because she knew the truth mattered. Her courage reminded me that we all have the ability to make a difference, even in small ways. By the time Malik finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. People approached him afterward to thank him for his honesty and bravery. Some even shared their own stories of facing unfair treatment, creating a sense of solidarity. Meanwhile, Karen, who had been quietly following the story online, saw videos of Malik's speech. She was moved by his grace and strength, feeling even more ashamed of her actions. Determined to make amends, she began volunteering with organizations that focused on fighting discrimination and supporting those falsely accused. As days turned into weeks, Malik noticed a shift in his own life. He received more ride requests than ever before, with passengers often recognizing him and expressing their support. His manager praised him for his resilience, and even Rachel stayed in touch, becoming a good friend. Malik knew he couldn't erase what had happened, but he also knew he wouldn't let it define him. He chose to focus on the positive, using his voice to inspire change and show others the importance of truth, fairness, and compassion. Malik's life slowly began to return to normal, but he realized he had a new sense of purpose. His experience had opened his eyes to the importance of standing up for fairness and kindness, not just for himself, but for others who might face similar situations. One day, he received a call from a local community center. They were organizing a workshop on racial bias and the importance of truth in accusations, and they wanted Malik to speak. At first, he hesitated. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight, but the thought of helping others gave him the courage to say yes. On the day of the event, Malik arrived at the community center, greeted by warm smiles and handshakes. The room was filled with people from all walks of life, young, old, professionals, students, all eager to hear his story. Standing at the podium, Malik began, "Thank you for having me here today. My name is Malik, and I'm here to share a story about something that happened to me. A story about judgment, truth, and the power of standing up for what's right." He recounted the incident, carefully explaining how Karen's false accusation had affected him and how Rachel's bravery in sharing the video had saved him. He didn't dwell on anger or blame. Instead, he focused on the lessons he had learned. "What happened to me wasn't just about one person's actions," Malik said. "It's about how we, as a society, often judge too quickly. We see someone and make assumptions without taking the time to understand who they really are. That's what needs to change." The room was silent, everyone listening intently. Malik continued, "What helped me get through this was knowing that there are good people, like Rachel, who are willing to stand up for the truth. And it reminded me that we all have the power to make things better, even in small ways." After his speech, the audience gave him a standing ovation. People came up to him afterward to share their own experiences, thanking him for his honesty and inspiration. Malik felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't felt before. His story wasn't just about what had happened to him. It was about helping others see the importance of fairness and empathy. Meanwhile, Karen continued her efforts to make amends. She volunteered at organizations that work to educate people about bias and the consequences of false accusations. She also donated to causes that supported individuals who had been wrongly accused. While she knew she couldn't undo what she had done, she was determined to learn from her mistakes and help others avoid making the same ones. Malik and Karen didn't cross paths again, but her efforts to change didn't go unnoticed. Malik heard about her work through mutual acquaintances and felt a small sense of relief knowing she was trying to do better. As Malik walked out of the community center that day, he felt proud. He had taken a painful experience and turned it into something meaningful. He knew there was still work to do, but he was ready to keep moving forward. Months after the incident, Malik's life had changed in ways he never expected. He was still driving his taxi, but now he was more than just a driver to his passengers. He was a symbol of resilience and truth. Many people recognized him, offering kind words and sharing how his story had inspired them to think more carefully about their own judgments and actions. One day, Malik received an invitation to attend a community award ceremony. To his surprise, he was being honored for his courage and grace in handling the false accusation and for using his experience to promote understanding and fairness. As he walked onto the stage to accept the award, Malik felt a surge of pride. He looked out at the crowd and saw faces of all ages and backgrounds, united by a desire to make the world a better place. He began his speech with a calm but strong voice. "This award means a lot to me," he said. "But it's not just about me. It's about all of us learning to be kinder, to listen more, and to stand up for what's right. The truth is powerful, and so is compassion. When we come together with those values, we can make a real difference." The audience applauded, and Malik saw Rachel in the front row, clapping enthusiastically. After the ceremony, she approached him with a big smile. "You deserve this, Malik," she said. "You've turned something so difficult into something so meaningful." "Thank you, Rachel," Malik replied. "I couldn't have done it without you. You were the first person to stand up for the truth. And that made all the difference." Meanwhile, Karen had continued her journey of making amends. She had started speaking at events about her experience, admitting her mistakes and encouraging others to challenge their biases. While that hadn't been easy, she found a sense of purpose in helping to educate others. One day, Malik received a letter from Karen. In it, she thanked him for meeting her and giving her a chance to apologize. She wrote about the work she was doing and how much she had learned from her actions. "I will never forget the harm I caused," she wrote, "but I am committed to making sure I never repeat those mistakes." Reading the letter, Malik felt a sense of closure. He didn't feel anger toward Karen anymore. Instead, he hoped her efforts would make a positive impact on others. As Malik drove through the city that evening, he reflected on how far he had come. The journey had been difficult, but it had also shown him the strength he didn't know he had. He had turned pain into purpose, proving that even the hardest experiences can lead to growth and change. Malik smiled as he picked up his next passenger, greeting them warmly. "How's your day going?" he asked, his voice full of kindness. The passenger smiled back. "Much better now. Thank you." And with that, Malik continued his journey, knowing he had made a difference not just in his own life, but in the lives of many others.